Heiress. Welcome to another episode of One Heiress Lane. Today we're going to talk about mentorship. We know mentorship is very important in our lives if we want to actually grow into something more and also get help. It's an interdependent relationship. And so I have today with me... I'm so excited. This is another one of my big sisters. This is Likesha Morgan Tillman, her whole government name. And she's gonna get more into all about her, but let me just tell you that every time I get around her, she's talking about mentorship. Absolutely. And I consider her to be one of my mentors, whether she knows it or not, because I call on her and I'll text her if I got any questions or concerns, and she's always pouring out. And every time I get with her, it's never a dull moment, and I'm always being some type of word has been deposited into me. So I just want you guys to be able to experience her on today. Definitely take everything that we talk about and, I don't know, write it down, do whatever you got to do to keep note of it. But let's go ahead and jump in. So right. Who is Likesha Morgan Tillman?
I think in short definition, the easiest way to define Likesha Morgan Tillman is that I am a village child. I know that many individuals have seen me talk about the village child, but the African proverb says it takes a village to raise a child. Yeah. And I am literally a product of that proverb. It took a village to literally raise me. So the best definition of who I am with all the, the formal stuff is that I'm a village child.
A village child. And so, of course, you are a product of a single parent home.
I am. Yes. I am a product of a single parent home. My mother raised me, the only child, and so I was in a household where it was just me and mom, and mom was a hard worker. She worked to make sure that she was able to provide for me. Right. And with that being said, mom worked hard and mom was always at work, so I was oftentimes either with grandma or with my grandmother, with my grandmother as well as my godmother, my godparents, and through that I was able to meet a lot of people from the community, a lot of people that actually became very tremendous leaders in my life. And so they poured into me, which is why I am just so gung-ho on that village child nature. It was a lot of women, strong women that were a part of my life, and I always say, had it not been for them, I would not be the person who I am today. Now granted, when they were pouring into me way back then, I had no idea what they were really pouring into me, but those seeds were planted, and as I continue to grow, they continue to keep me, in the community, keep me around certain things, keep me around leadership, not really wanting to really step out there, although, it's kind of like I didn't realize they were molding me at that time to be a leader. But I just watched, I learned a lot of different things, and I took all of those things and I make sure that I put them, into a deposit of where I could keep them, because I knew eventually I would have to come back to them and reference back to them.
That's awesome, because I personally, even though I was born and raised here in High Point, North Carolina, and then my grandmother raised me up until age of 8. When we left from here, we went to Texas, and it was just my mom and my 3 siblings. And so here it is, 4 kids and her, and she had my aunt, which is her oldest sister, helping her out. And I don't think I've ever really got to experience what that village was, because we moved from place to place. And when my mom met my stepdad in the Army, we definitely, every 3 years, we were constantly moving. So it almost feels like if I did have it, I lost track of that, or those people that were depositing things in me. Were you in one central location pretty much all your life?
I'm born and raised in the city of High Point. Yeah. I have never left. The furthest I've ever gone was I went to Graham, North Carolina, which is on the other side of Burlington, for a short season. Short, like 12 months. That's it. That's it. And I was back in the city of High Point. So I was born and raised in High Point. Everything that I experienced was right in the community of Gifford County. So there were relationships that were built, and that's what, even with being a village child, is all about. It's the relationships that were built, the people that I met. And while at a young age, I may not have known how important, the secretary of the city of High Point would be, or,
Right.
you know, the director at the community center would be. But because I was in their presence, they knew and they identified who I was. They acknowledged my name. And so as I began to grow up and I would get involved with things in the community as a teenager, they remembered my face. They remembered my name. And so these relationships are continue to grow and grow and grow. And then once I become an adult and I decide or not decide exactly what I want to be, you know, I'm still engaged. And so these people still remember me. So, you know, even now it's kind of like, oh my God, the little light-skinned chubby girl that was so quiet. You know, they're so shocked now when they see me in different facets within the community, within the church, because they remember back when. And, you know, even for me, it's amazing to even hear their words that are fed back to me from their experience of me whenever I was a child. So, you know, it's that village thing is all about relationship as well. And so I don't necessarily think that the village actually has to be in one area. For me, it was. But I also believe that that village can be in multiple areas, because even as I became an adult, still evolving in who I would be, I met some wonderful people that were not in Gifford County. They were not in North Carolina. I had some individuals that were in Ohio, some individuals that were in Virginia, some individuals that were in Georgia, that were people that connected with me in some very critical times of my life, and they became nurturers of what I needed in that season. And I consider them to be part of the village as well.
That's awesome. You said on Facebook, well, actually this was on IG.
Okay.
You said how you were a proud village child, which we just went over, and you would forever stand boldly giving honor and credit to those who have been a part of depositing into you your values, principles, and lessons and morals. Can you expound on like what some of those lessons and values were?
Absolutely, absolutely. So I have, my grandmother is, oh my goodness, my grandmother is my heart. You know, unfortunately she's no longer with us, but I was always grandma's girl. I was always with grandma, because as I stated, mom was working, so I was with grandma. Grandma had a foundation of a strong faith foundation, and so grandma kept me in church. And so with me being with grandma, of course I was around the seasoned individuals, so I learned a lot of wisdom at a very young age because I was around the seasoned individuals. And then I had a godmother that is unfortunately no longer with us as well, but she was the first barber in the city of High Point, Wavonia Abels.
Wow.
Yes. And so I spent a lot of time with her as well. Now, grandma and my godmother were on two totally opposite ends of the totem pole. While grandma had a strong faith foundation, my godmother had a strong faith foundation as well. But godmother was real, and she just tell you like it is, okay? She would tell you like it is. And so she was an entrepreneur. She built business. She had built relationships within the community. But her thing was, listen, I know you got a God, and I got a God too, but at the end of the day, you got to do what you got to do as well. And so she was adamant about education. Get your education. Don't fool over that. Make sure that you go to school, you learn. You know, you might want to talk a little bit, but at the end of the day, you make sure that you do your studies and you do your work and things of that nature. And so she would give me those real hard conversations that sometimes I may not necessarily get from grandma, because I'm grandma's baby, remember? So grandma might be like, oh, you know, it's okay, da, 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 da. But godmother would give it to me straight. Listen, we're not raising any punks around here. We're raising women to be strong leaders, to be a part of the community, because at the end of the day, there's somebody that's looking at you. There's somebody that is actually not only looking at you, but they're looking at us. You're a product of us, because when we take time and we pour into you, they're looking at the fact that we're pouring into you. So you need to reciprocate that in which you're receiving. And so, you know, those things were very precious to me, because these people did sacrifice. They sacrificed their time. They sacrificed sometimes financially. It was never a moment that when I got ready to go back to school, my godmother didn't take me to Sam's Club. And back then, you know, going to Sam's Club was like going to Disney World. You hear me? But we would go to Sam's Club and she would buy me all these school supplies and things, you know. And so it's just kind of like, oh my God, you know, the most expensive things that I'm like, okay, I can't have that. We can't afford for that. You know, she would buy for me, and I'm just like, she just bought this. And granted, she's my godmother, but she has her kids too, you know. But she would really plant and sow seeds into me, and then her family took me on as their family, and so she had a sister-in-law that was very big on working in the community. So I was always at the community center, you know, even with the older individuals, you know, doing meetings and in 4-H and doing stuff like that. And so she helped groom me as a leader. And so I say morals because I feel like they taught me some very key, valuable things at a very young age. And had that not been poured into me at a young age, I would have not respected and valued people, first of all, people in general. And then I wouldn't respect and value even myself. And so I take those things and I look at those things and I'm like, oh my God, you know, I could have never paid anyone to do that for me. And granted, again, I may not have understood it as a child, but as I've gone on through life, I understand the value of what they poured into me, and I could never financially repay them back for that. And so when I say I will always acknowledge, that's the reason why I'm so strong in the community now. That's the reason why I say I am the empowerment coach, because when you see me, it's only natural for me to encourage people, do what it is that you desire to do. You can't stop. You know, your situation doesn't define you. You know, where you live does not define you. What you came from does not define you. If you have the mindset to do, you can do it. All you need sometimes is just that push. And so I'm there often to be that push, that empowerment to say, listen, if I did it, you can do it, you know, because I was just short of being in the line to get, you know, like they used to say, the government cheese and all that stuff. I was just short. And it wasn't because we didn't qualify. It was just because we had favor with people that we didn't have to. We didn't necessarily have to go that route. But as I identified that, you know what, I'm just like somebody else. The only thing that's different from me is that I made the choice that I'm going to go further. I'm going to keep pushing. And so I've got to make sure that I deposit that back. I got to do the same thing. The way that I can honor my grandmother, the way that I can honor my godmother, the way that I can honor my aunt that had me in the community, is that I've got to pay it forward. I've got to now do the same thing that somebody did for me. And so that's why I say I will always give honor. I will always give honor to my mom, that while she was working because she wanted to provide for me. So she had that ambition. I'm going to work. I'm going to make it happen. You know, I'm going to take a shack and make it a home, you know, so it can look crazy outside, but on the inside, it looked like a mansion. And so it gave me that same ambition to do the same thing in life and to make sure that other people know you can do this. You can do it.
You can, because believe it or not, like my mom, when we used to live here initially, she lived in, oh gosh, it's right across from the hospital. It was the projects. Whatever that place was, she lived there. And I remember always coming to visit my mom, because of course I was raised by my grandma. So I would just every now and again come visit my mom. But when we moved from there and moved to Texas, it wasn't really until probably a few years ago that I began to reflect on like all the things that my mother was doing just to see us have a better life.
Oh my goodness.
And then I didn't understand it. Like, why are you taking me from North Carolina? Why are we moving out here? Why are you telling me this? Why are you telling me that? It's because she wanted something better, and she saw more than I could as a young girl.
Absolutely. Let me tell you, my mom worked third shift for a good period of time, and Juanita Hills in High Point is like on the opposite. I think it is the only project that's classified in the city of High Point that's like all the way on the other side of High Point than any other project. So we lived in Juanita Hills. I went to school, however, in a district that was all the way on the opposite side of High Point, and that was because mom worked at night. So in the daytime or whenever I got out of school or whatever, I needed to be in a vicinity that was close to somebody that would be home or that could get to me or whatever. So I would get off the school bus now in front of my godmother's house. And right there in front of my godmother's house was a city bus stop.
Wow.
I would get off the school bus. I would get on the city bus. Now catch this. This was at age 4. I mean, not age 4, when I was in 4th grade.
4th grade, still like grade. What? 4th grade city bus?
You won't do that to your kids these days.
don't do it.
But I would get off the bus, the school bus, get on the city bus in 4th grade and ride it clean across the city to home, to get off the bus, to go in the house myself, because mom worked at night, so mom would probably be asleep or whatever, and get, going on my schoolwork or whatnot. So I had to literally like be mature at a very young age, but I identified this is what I have to do. Mom's working, she's trying to, so I got to do what I got to do.
Right.
So it's those elements that even young, sometimes people will look at their situation and they get bitter about it, but I chose not to do that. I chose to kind of see that in a different light. You know, how many kids do you know can say, you know what, in 4th grade, I rode the city bus. The city bus driver knew who I was.
Now you had to be real mature. And
I couldn't even reach the cord to pull the handle to say, okay, it's my stop to get off.
Right.
I would be raving at the bus driver, hey, that's my stop, that's my house.
So that's really a village, right?
Yes,
the
exactly,
bus driver, right?
Exactly. So, everybody they knew who I was, and they literally took care of me, and I'm thankful for that. I didn't run into any horror stories or anything, so I'm thankful for that. And I have to, every time I see these different people, I say, oh my God, I just love on them so much and tell them thank you, because I could have had a different experience, but I didn't.
So mentorship is at the heart of who you are. Yeah, she's always pushing. I remember when she just released a Rebirth. This was last year, and she'll talk more about it. Okay. It was a Friday and a Saturday, and I went that Friday night not really knowing what to expect, and I was just coming and sitting in the seat of expectation, and can I tell you, I was blown away by what I received, and I loved it so much. And what she spoke, I ended up putting it in my planner that I ended up creating. You said, it was a decree and declare. You said, I'm going somewhere, and where I'm going doesn't look like where I've been.
Absolutely.
I was just like, oh my God. This is for me. So whether she knows it or not, like, she's always pouring. Can you just expound more on that? Like, where I'm going? Because of course you said where, like, my background, that doesn't define me.
It doesn't.
Like, where did that come from?
Absolutely, because I think that sometimes we get, and this actually goes into the theme of this year for Always a Lady as well, but sometimes we get so caught in the shadows of life.
Right.
Things and situations that life throw at us, that we allow it to shape us. And we have choices. We have choices, and we have the choice to not allow these things to shape us into the negative things that it could shape us. And so when we get the mindset of, you know what, I am who God has called me to be. I am an heir and a joint heir with Him. I am an individual that shall be the lender and not the borrower. Then everything around me has to come subject to look like that in which I am professing. And so anything that comes according against that, then it's kind of like, well, no, that don't belong to me. But oftentimes we accept those things, and that's where we go wrong. We accept those things that don't resemble what we're actually walking towards, and those things that we're actually saying that we shall become. So, even though we experience some things at times, even though because let's not get it twisted, tests and trials will come.
Right.
And when they come because when we take the test, we got to pass the test.
Exactly.
When we pass the test, that means we're knowledgeable of something. When we take that knowledge and we apply it to life, and we don't have to repeat that test again, that's when we gain wisdom. Okay? Yeah. So you got those multiple steps that's going on, and all of it's called what? Process.
My God.
You cannot neglect the process.
The process.
But nevertheless, that big P word that everybody's trying to run from.
Yes.
But nevertheless, in that though, when you go through the test, sometimes we get weary, we get tired, we get, discouraged and all that stuff. But we have to remember, I'm going through this because I'm getting ready to learn something. Right. I'm going through this because this is going to make me powerful. I'm going through this because this is actually going to give me the insight of what I need to get to my next. Amen. And I have to go through that in order to be able to receive that. However, when I go through that test, it doesn't necessarily say that if I don't make a B, that I'm a dummy.
Right.
No, it doesn't say that. So we have to make sure that when we go through tests, it don't mean it's going to define us to be a dummy or that it's going to define us to live in poverty. No, it simply says you took the test, you passed the test.
Right.
Now take what it is that you learned from the test and apply it to your life.
Right.
So just because I came from the projects, just because I rode the city bus, just because I had to endure the process of going to school on one side of the town and then going all the way to the other side of the town to live, does not mean that I have to endure that all my life. What that says is that, you know what, I was able to meet a whole lot of people, and I had to travel a long distance to meet some other people.
Right.
But guess what? I might have my own transportation company one day because I've experienced that. I know what that looks like. Maybe I want to have a transportation company for young children because I want to put them in a more comfortable environment to where they feel comfortable with being able to ride transportation from one side of town to the other side of town. You know, you never know what that eventually ends up to be. So I don't look like it. My past does not dictate what my future looks like, because guess what? I have been called to be a millionaire.
Amen.
And my past doesn't look like millionaire, but guess what? I'm working towards it.
Amen.
And so when you see me by the end of 2019 and you say, wow, she really became a millionaire, guess what? My past didn't reflect that, but I'm one now. You know?
Exactly. And I will attest to that. And it's like, you can't project what you don't perceive.
That's right.
And so if I don't perceive myself to be that, then I can't project that in my life.
Absolutely not.
Yeah.
You can't. So you have to take the barriers and the restrictions off of your mind.
Right.
You have to dream.
Right.
You have to dream. You know, I had a boot camp called Daydreamers, and that's the reason why I did that, because sometimes people will sit in their seats at their jobs and they'll dream about, okay, what if I wasn't here? What if I didn't have to come to an 8 to 5? You know, what is it that I would love to do and I would love to get paid for doing it?
Right.
Guess what? You can.
You can.
You can really do it. But you got to write it down. You got to make that plan to work towards what that looks like. You cannot allow your situation to stop you from dreaming. As long as you can dream it, you can have it.
You can have it. You know, and I hear a lot of people say, well, you know, I'm just going to keep a mental note. No, it needs to be written down. So what does writing down, what does that actually do for you?
Writing down makes it live. Let me tell you, I just turned 40 and my brain is fried. You hear me? It doesn't have the capacity to take much in it these days. So I can barely remember some people's names, which is why I walk around and say, hey, lady. I can't remember their name. But needless to say, whenever we have things that come to us, we say we're going to take a mental note. I can walk out here right now and forget exactly what it was. But when I put it on paper, it makes it come to life. Why? Because when I write it, I may close that book. I may close that journal. I may sit it to the side. But one day, guess what? I'm going to pick up that journal. I'm going to flip through those pages. I'm going to read what I wrote. And I'm going to be like, what?
Right.
I wrote this?
Right.
And it may be that I've already made steps to achieving that and don't even realize that I made steps to achieving it. It may be that someone has come in contact with me that has the ability to help what I wrote in that journal to come to pass, and I don't even know it. It may be that I've not touched it at all, but when I read it, it's something about what I wrote that connects with something on the inside of me and says, you got to pick that up and you got to make it happen. So it's a reminder, it's accountability. But the Bible tells us to write the vision and to make it plain so those that read it will run. That's not just for anybody that read it, that's also for us. That we will read it and something in us will leap and run to work towards what it is that we've written.
And you know, I like that because I journal like almost every day. It is my thing. And I don't know how people can go to church service and not write. Like, I can't comprehend everything God is telling me. And when things come out, I need to write it down so I can have time to go back and reflect on that. And I find it to be a help in my life because even when I'm going through, I used to complain a lot. My husband would be like, every time you come home from that job, you complain. I'm gonna need you to do something about that. And it wasn't until I went to Lady Leah had a women's conference that was Myrtle Beach, actually. I went there and I would ask my husband, like, how do I know when God's speaking to me? Like, what does that sound like? Because I'm listening for like an audio voice, and he would say, like, you would know. It's very soft. It speaks to you in a way that you know. So I was standing at the beach and I was watching the waves brush against the shore, and I remember that and it still stands today. And I felt like this is what God said to me, that you need to reposition yourself. And he was like my blessings are just like the waves. They're continuous and they're continuing to flow up. But look at where you're at. And so I repositioned myself and got closer to the waves. And as the water began to brush against my feet, I began to sink. And he talked, and it made me feel like the tree planted by the rivers of water. Like it's a constant repositioning. It's not that I got in one spot and that was just finale.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You cannot progress forward if you continue to stay in one position. You have to have motion. You have to have movement.
Right.
So while we may be in a place for a season, we're in that place for a season because we're building something. But once we have built that and established it, then it's time to move on to the next thing.
Right.
So we can't become stagnant. We can't stay in the same spot.
I saw this quote, or maybe I heard it, I listen to podcasts a lot, that said that the calling is different in every season. So I think a lot of times we get wrapped up thinking that, okay, this is my calling and you're going to stick with this, but it actually, even with the seasons, can change.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You know, everything is changing. So we can't expect to be the same. I can't expect you to be the same Jessica that you were in 1994.
Right.
Because you got to make sure that you continue to be relevant.
Right.
If we don't change, then we're no longer relevant.
Right.
And we got to make sure that if we're going to make our stamp into this global nation, then we've got to be relevant. And we can't be relevant being stagnant or stuck in the same position.
No.
We can't. We got to grow.
Exactly.
We got to.
I do